James Russell, like most people in the 21st century, rely heavily on my internet connection. I work from home as a freelance web developer, so it's not just about streaming videos or browsing social media, it's my livelihood. Lately, though, I had been experiencing frustratingly slow speeds. Pages would load at a snail's pace, video calls would constantly buffer, and uploading files felt like trying to push a boulder uphill. I chalked it up to general network congestion at first, figuring everyone was online more these days. I even upgraded my internet package, hoping for some relief. But the problem persisted. Then, one evening while troubleshooting my router, I stumbled upon a list of connected devices. My jaw nearly dropped. There were more gadgets listed than I owned, way more. I recognized my laptop, my phone, my smart TV, and my smart speaker. But there were several devices with generic names I couldn't identify, devices that were constantly active, sucking up bandwidth like thirsty vampires. A quick Google search revealed that these devices belonged to smart appliances, refrigerators, thermostats, and even a smart oven. That's when the dreadful realization hit me. Karen Martins, my neighbor from hell, was leeching off my Wi-Fi. Karen and I had never gotten along. From the moment she moved in 2 years ago, her subtle yet persistent microaggressions had been grating on my nerves. It started with comments about my exotic landscaping, progressed to her suspiciously frequent questions about my profession, and culminated in her blatant attempts to police my guests and their parking habits. I always suspected a racist bias simmering beneath the surface of her overly sweet southern charm. This internet theft felt like just another manifestation of her entitlement, another way to take something that wasn't hers, simply because she thought she could. I stewed for a good hour, anger boiling inside me. Part of felt like confronting her directly, laying out the evidence and demanding she stop. But I knew that would likely devolve into a shouting match, a scenario she probably craved, one where she could play the victim and rally the neighborhood sympathies. Instead, I decided to take a more strategic approach. I logged into my router settings and changed my Wi-Fi password to something long, complex, and utterly unguessable. As an extra measure, I enabled MAC address filtering, allowing only my authorized devices to connect. Problem solved, or so I thought. The very next morning, I was jolted awake by a series of frantic knocks on my door. Annoyed, I dragged myself out of bed, squinting through the peephole. It was Karen, her face contorted with a mixture of fury and panic. I hesitated, then reluctantly opened the door a crack. "James, what have you done to my internet?" she shrieked, her voice several decibels louder than necessary. "It's not working. I can't access my email, my shows are buffering, and my smart fridge isn't even telling me what to buy." I feigned ignorance, putting on my best innocent face. "Good morning, Karen. I'm not sure what you're talking about. My internet seems to be working fine." "Don't play coy with me, James," she raged, pushing the door inward. I braced myself against it, stopping her from fully entering. "I know you changed the password. You're doing this on purpose, aren't you?" "Just because," she trailed off, her face reddening, as if realizing she was about to say something overtly offensive. "Just because what, Karen?" I challenged, raising an eyebrow. "Just because I finally decided to secure my Wi-Fi network. I had no idea you were even using it." "Well, I was," she admitted, her voice dripping with indignation. "And it was very convenient. I don't see why you had to go and ruin everything." I couldn't help but laugh. "Ruin everything? Karen, you were stealing my internet. It's not your right to use my services without permission or payment." That seemed to set her off even further. "It's just internet, James. It's not like it's costing you anything." I sighed, trying to remain calm. "Actually, it is costing me. It's slowing down my connection, affecting my work, and increasing my bandwidth usage. And besides, it's the principle of the thing. You can't just take what isn't yours." She glared at me, her eyes narrowed into slits. You're just being spiteful, James. You probably hate me, don't you? Just because I'm. She paused again, searching for the right, or rather, wrong, words. A concerned homeowner? I rolled my eyes. Karen, this has nothing to do with anything other than you stealing my internet. Get your own service. I slammed the door shut, cutting off whatever pathetic excuse she was about to offer. I could hear her muttering something unintelligible through the wood, but I ignored it and went back to bed. I thought that would be the end of it, just another unpleasant encounter with my racist neighbor. I was dead wrong. A couple of hours later, I was finally back at my desk, trying to focus on a coding project. I had headphones on, blasting some upbeat music to drown out any potential Karen-related disturbances. Suddenly, the music stopped. My computer screen went black. Everything went silent. Power outage. My first thought was that it was a simple blackout, something that occasionally happened in our neighborhood during storms. I got up to check the circuit breaker, but everything seemed fine. Then I looked out the window. Across the street, a crowd was forming around a utility pole near Karen's house. People were pointing and shouting, their faces a mixture of shock and anger. I cautiously went outside to investigate. As I got closer, the scene became clearer. The utility pole was sparking and smoking. Wires dangled precariously, swaying in the breeze. And standing near the base of the pole, looking utterly bewildered, was Karen. Someone in the crowd yelled, "Did you do this, Karen? Did you cut the power lines?" Karen stammered, I just wanted to turn off his internet. He changed the password." The collective gasp from the crowd was audible. It was as if she had just confessed to a far more heinous crime than simply cutting off the electricity. People started shouting at her, their voices rising in outrage. "Are you crazy, Karen? You could have killed someone. You cut off power to the whole neighborhood. You're going to pay for this." I stood there, stunned, trying to process what I was seeing. Karen had actually, physically, cut the power lines in an attempt to disable my internet. The sheer audacity, the recklessness, the utter stupidity of her actions was beyond comprehension. This wasn't just petty harassment anymore, this was criminal behavior. The chaos continued for what felt like an eternity. Neighbors were calling the power company, others were on their phones dialing 911. Karen, realizing the gravity of her actions, began to backpedal, trying to deny any responsibility. "I didn't mean to cut all the power," she mumbled, her voice trembling. "I just wanted to disable his Wi-Fi." Her pathetic attempts at justification only fueled the crowd's anger. One of my other neighbors started recording Karen's confession on her phone and live-streamed it on Facebook. Within minutes, police sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder as they approached. 2 patrol cars screeched to a halt in front of Karen's house. Officers jumped out, surveyed the scene, and immediately approached her. "Karen Martins?" one of the officers asked, his voice stern. Karen nodded weakly, her eyes wide with fear. "You're under arrest for vandalism, property damage, and reckless endangerment," the officer announced, placing her in handcuffs. As they led her to the patrol car, Karen looked in my direction, her face a mask of shame and resentment. I met her gaze, but felt nothing but contempt. She had brought this upon herself. The police spent the next hour questioning witnesses and gathering evidence. The power company arrived and began the arduous task of repairing the damaged lines. The neighborhood buzzed with a mixture of anger, disbelief, and a strange sense of vindication. Karen's true colors had finally been revealed, and everyone had witnessed it. Later that evening, after the power was restored and the police had left, several neighbors came to my door to apologize for Karen's behavior and to offer their support. They expressed their shock and disgust at her actions, assuring me that they had always suspected something was off about her. It was a small consolation, but it meant a lot to know that I wasn't alone in this. The legal process that followed Karen's arrest was lengthy and complex. The power company filed a lawsuit against her for the cost of repairing the damaged power lines and for the loss of revenue caused by the outage. The district attorney charged her with multiple felonies, including vandalism, property damage, and reckless endangerment, carrying potentially significant prison time. Karen, unsurprisingly, pleaded not guilty. Her lawyer argued that she was suffering from a temporary lapse in judgment, fueled by stress and anxiety. They tried to portray her as a victim of cyberbullying and social isolation, hoping to garner sympathy from the jury. However, the evidence against her was overwhelming: eyewitness testimony, video recordings, and her own initial confession. The trial was a media circus. News outlets from across the country picked up the story, dubbing Karen the Wi-Fi wrecker and the power-hungry neighbor. The live-streamed video of her confession went viral, turning her into a symbol of suburban entitlement and racial prejudice. I was called to testify, recounting my experiences with Karen's harassment and the events leading up to the power outage. I tried to remain calm and objective, focusing on the facts and avoiding any inflammatory language. It was difficult, though, to not express my anger and frustration at her blatant racism and utter disregard for the safety of our community. After weeks of testimony and deliberation, the jury finally reached a verdict. Karen Martins was found guilty on all counts. She was sentenced to 5 years in prison, ordered to pay restitution to the power company, and required to undergo anger management therapy. While Karen's conviction brought a sense of closure, the incident left a lasting impact on our neighborhood. There was a lingering tension, a feeling of unease that took time to dissipate. However, it also sparked a conversation about racial bias, privilege, and the importance of community solidarity. Many of my neighbors, including some who had previously been indifferent or even sympathetic to Karen, began to actively challenge racist attitudes and behaviors. She was then put to rest by the jury and was sent away for a very long time. James could finally have peace.